All right, 10:02 on the fan. What's happening? It's the Tiki and Tierney show. Clock's ticking on Buck. Clock's ticking on Buck. Buck Showalter has 30 days to fix this and get his team's head out of its ass, or Buck's got to go. This season has been, well, obviously the exact opposite of last year. Listless, uninspired, but it's broken. It's broken. The glaring nightly absence or erosion, and it's getting worse, by the way, of fundamentals is utterly unacceptable. And it's not personal. We all like Buck. We all respect Buck. 30 days. If I own the Mets, 30 days. I'm going to give him 30 days with another infusion of a young kid. Hopefully they play him every day with, hey, maybe if you hit 512 instead of 350, you would have been up 2 weeks ago. So the Mets finally wake up and do the right thing. Vientos is up. Play him, right? I'm going to give Buck Teak 1 month to trot out the trio, and hopefully eventually it's 4 with Mauricio. The kids, to give them and Buck a month to roll through. I know Verlander was bad, but a Verlander, Scherzer, 4-5 starts. And if they can't fix it, Buck Showalter must go.
I'm the last one to want to defend an underperforming team and a Skip who has a $340+ million payroll behind him. But at the same time, we all know why this got to this point, because their philosophy, which we talked about 2 months ago, is a broken one. It's not reliable. Max Scherzer is trying to find himself, and I respect the hell out of Max Scherzer. I'm going to give him another month before I start saying he might be heading down the down slope. I mean, he's clearly already at the peak and maybe stepping down a little bit. Justin Verlander got rocked yesterday in his home debut to the point where he got booed at Citi.
It's ugly.
Francisco Lindor, we talk about his OPS. The numbers will lie to you, but just the awareness that you usually see from him wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
You have inconsistencies and poor construction of a roster and what feels like a siloed clubhouse. You got this piece and then this piece, and nothing's together. So part of that is on Buck, but a lot of it is on the veterans that are supposed to be the guys that this team is depending upon, and they're just not showing up on a night-to-night basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the difference in baseball with the sport that I played, football. You can have a bad Tuesday, you can have a bad Wednesday, hell, you can have a bad entire week. As long as you're balling on Sunday, you're fine. In baseball, you can't be that way. You can't afford bad days. The expectation for this team with the payroll that it's out there, that's the real downside. We know it's broken, but the reason it pisses you off is because the payroll is so enormous, egregiously enormous, when you think about being 5 games under 500 at this point. So I hear you, it's on Buck. But Buck has almost got his hands tied because this team has no identity.
Okay, but hold on a sec. What's the difference from last year's team? Because last year we sat here, aside from execution, last year we sat here and we said, I mean, look at the way Buck's got him going. From game one, backing up bases. Like fundamentals you stress to 7-year-olds that sometimes major leaguers take for granted and we take for granted as fans. Getting down bunts, sacrifice flies, going first to third base, hits to right field, scoring from first base on doubles. Every little thing that we sat here, and rightfully, really praised the Mets for doing, because they were locked in from the moment they left Port St. Lucie. It's the exact opposite. So if we sat here last year and we propped up Buck, and rightfully so, how the hell are we going to sit here this year when they're doing the exact opposite and not blame Buck?
Well, part of it is simple. They played the Washington Nationals. They beat them up. They played the Phillies, who ended up firing their skip.
You're talking about last year.
I'm talking about last year. You said, what's different?
Okay.
They beat up on the Phillies last year. Arizona, that was in Citi. I'm just looking at the schedule now. Arizona wasn't great last year. San Francisco was flawed.
Didn't they go out there? I thought they went out to Arizona early.
That was the second
Gotcha.
series that they had Arizona. St. Louis, they overachieved. Let's call it at St. Louis a little bit, because St. Louis is always good. The Atlanta Braves, who they then hit at the beginning of May, Bay, they struggled at the beginning of the season. You remember this, right?
I remember this.
Then they had Philly again.
This
is post-firing.
I think that's when they had the big comeback, right? That crazy comeback.
Yep, that's right. And then Washington again.
Yeah.
So
but those
the early part of their schedule last year was let's call it soft.
Yeah, but this isn't the NFL where we say it's circumstantial. You're starting up against bad teams. No, it's not, though, because the teams they're losing to now, outside of last night, they're worse than those teams that you mentioned from last year. The Reds, the Rockies, the Tigers. These teams are the dregs of baseball. They can't beat them.
But
they don't even look functional.
But let's also not forget, or not.
They look terrible.
Let's not mask the fact that the NL in total stinks this year. Stinks. Now, maybe it's because of the balanced scheduling. There are 5 teams right now that have winning records in the NL. 5. No, not. I'm talking about Miami, who's at 500.
Yeah.
5
and ahead of the Mets now. But of those 5 teams, I would think that I'm almost sure most of them were either playoff teams a year ago or just missed out, meaning the expectations that filtered in from last season to this season, they are being met by those teams, except the Mets.
Well, the Padres
who won 101 games and stink.
The Padres are 3 games under.
Yeah, but they're starting to get hot.
Arizona's is. I mean, they weren't playoffs last
year.
No,
that's the one exception. I think the Brewers are pretty good.
The Pirates are 2 games over.
Yeah, the Pirates are reeling. The Pirates have lost 9 of 11, whatever the hell it is. They're sinking.
But my point is, what is this? 32 games into the season. There are 5 teams in the National League that are over 500. So you look at the Mets and you're like, oh, God, they suck.
They do.
They're 3 games under 500. They suck. They're half a game out of the wild card.
I don't look at it that way. If you choose to, I respect that. But I think it's deeper than that, Teak. This is a flawed team, an uninspired team. Here's the bigger problem. This team, based on the payroll that Teak just brought up, and we all know it, right? This is a win-now team. Mm-hmm. And if you ain't winning now, then I've got to find a solution to try to make you win now. And listen, you are right. I'm not trying to absolve Marte, though he's been a little bit better. Last for a while, he was hitting like 209. Yeah, I think he's around 250, whatever it is. Yeah, the veterans, McNeil's hitting a soft, 260 this year, and Alonso's had a bad May, and Beatty, outside of last night going deep, has had a bad May. I understand that the players are getting paid and they're not performing. I'm with you on that. I'm not trying to, just gloss over those failures because the Mets players stink right now. But what's more alarming to me, is that the characteristics that defined the Mets last year always mentally locked in from the first pitch to the 27th out. It's completely been stripped away. And I've got to look at the manager. Well, I've got to.
It's also, the injuries and the age and the underperformance. And yes, it also ultimately will fall on the manager, but they can't help that Carlos Carrasco was a shell of what he was last year, and now he's on the IL. They can't help that David Peterson, who was thought to be an emergency starter, is getting rocked every single time he takes the mound. They can't help that Quintana is jacked up as well, even though there's some positive news on his return at some point. Yeah. They can't help that. Well, I guess they can help that Scherzer and Verlander are damn near 40, if not over 40 already, and just feeling age. That's not all on Buck. Obviously, it's on Epler as well, but at some point, the expectation of performance falls on the guy who's actually performing or supposed to be, and they're just not. They're not. I mean, Pete Alonso.
Why the Phillies fired Girardi a year ago? It's the same premise that applies. Well, the players weren't playing well, but yet they got rid of Girardi. Look what happened.
Well, I think he was losing the clubhouse.
Well, maybe Bucks lose to the clubhouse. They don't look like they're playing hard.
It was a good chance.
Francisco Lindor didn't know how many outs they were in the first inning last night.
There's a good chance that is actually what's happening.
Okay, that's why I'm saying 30 more days to prove that that's not the case. And I'll tell you what. I hope in the 30 games, I don't know if they actually have 30 games in 30 days, but over the, using the month, whatever. I hope that they play to a 700 clip and Buck makes me look like an idiot, which has happened before and it's going to happen again. Looking like that's fine. I've got great respect for Buck Showalter. But this team, whether it's Nimmo trying to steal second foolishly with no repercussion, whether it's Alvarez getting picked off first base with the bases juiced, whether it's Lindor last night with a ground ball up the middle, stepping on second to get the third out, and then not knowing that there were 2 outs. And by the way, nice scoop by Alonso, but it was meaningless because that was actually the 4th out. This is what I don't get, and this is the problem. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of it starts with Lindor. I really, not even the OPS. I'm not going there. This guy seems more interested in the WBC, like the energy that Francisco Lindor emits. I'm sorry, during that baseball showcase versus the day-to-day now when his team is languishing and going nowhere. To me, if I'm a Mets fan, I'm offended by it. So let me get this straight. You just played horrendously. Not to mention all the other teams that we know, Tigers, but the Nationals. And in the first inning, in Verlander's first start in Queens, you don't know how many outs there are? That's a problem.
Maybe he was overexcited because Verlander was at home in Queens.
He was distracted.
He was distracted.
By the pomp and circumstance.
Yes.
So
before he gave up 6 runs.
I hope that they win 23 out of the next 30, and Buck goes on to win NL Manager of the Year. But right now, listen, you can argue, and I respect this, my position that I'm giving Buck 30 days to get this right, or just to try to save the season, you got to move on. We can have that debate, and we will. 877-337-6666. To me, you cannot debate. You could try, but it's really not debatable. The lack of urgency, the lack of effectiveness, the lack of efficiency, the lack of energy that this team trots out every single night. They are now seemingly, I'm not saying that, I know that they don't like it, but seemingly they are accepting losing. And that's on the manager. I mean, hey, you can't get rid of 25 guys. All right. Let me get to Will first up, Long Island on the Fan Tiki and Tierney Show. What's happening, Will? How are you?
Tiki and Tierney, what's up, guys?
All's good, man.
What's up, Will?
What's happening? I just wanted to talk about Tierney's point before about, the big difference between the Mets this year and last year. I think it comes down to two things right now, right? Last year, the Mets, if you really watched them early on in games, they were working counts with the opposing pitchers. I feel like every time now this year, the Mets, they're down 0-2, they're swinging at first pitches, making lazy outs, the pitch, the fifth inning with a low pitch count. And the Mets are having a
Will, I got to clip you there. Point made. Teak, why don't you take that point? I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, he's just saying they're not disciplined. They're not being disciplined at the plate. And again, that's to what Will was trying to say before he broke up. That's on the player. It's not on the skip to get up there.
Well, that's also an approach. That's an approach.
I mean,
I know we don't associate baseball with like coaching necessarily. That is an approach that should be addressed by the manager.
I think it's probably a game plan thing, to your point.
Yeah.
Right? When you game plan for whoever was pitching last night, you say, look, jump on him early. He tends to throw fastballs early in the count, and whatever it may be. And so it's an approach that's game plan, but ultimately the batters, the guys at the plate, have to determine whether or not they're going to swing or not.
Well, then why were we giving Buck so much praise last year when the players were doing the good? That seems a little selective.
It is.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's be fair here, Teak.
I'm trying to hold the players accountable.
Yep.
Ultimately, the skip can say whatever he wants, but it's the player who's standing up there at the plate that has to make a decision on whether to swing at a good pitch or a bad pitch. That's ultimately on the player.
I got you. 877-337-6666. What's going on, everybody? Hey, happy Wednesday, the state of the Mets. Inside of our Town Fair Tire studio, our friends at Town Fair remind you that you always get the guaranteed lowest price on name brand tires from Connecticut to Maine. Nobody beats Town Fair Tire. Nobody. Listen, if the New York Mets were losing, a slew of 7-6 games and 11-7, a couple of 9-8s. We're not having this discussion because some people, I think too many, you referenced it. I don't think you're leaning on this as a crutch, but you did illuminate this, so I want to circle back to it. The injuries. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, problematic. I mean, Peterson, atrocious. McGill, up and down. We know what's happened with the Mets so far this year. Everybody's banged up. Okay. But the offense is healthy, and the offense looks impotent.
Yeah.
So that I would almost absolve certainly Buck and the team in terms of this malaise that they've been in if they were at least like fighting and they just couldn't overcome the deficiencies in the rotation, which I grant everybody are real. I'm not reacting to the Mets. Let me be clear. This is my main point. I'm not reacting to their record. There are circumstances that have contributed to that. Mm-hmm. I got it. I don't need to be repetitive because I agree with that. But the way they look uninspired, and they look largely unaffected by the losing.
Yeah,
And that's a problem.
Well, that's Buck, but that's also the locker room. That's all, or the clubhouse in this case. That it's also the energy, the identity, all of those things that you talk about that winning teams have, which we saw last year, we're not seeing this year. It's like there's a cloud hanging over, a pall hanging over. It's likely just because they're losing, but there's just something that's missing from this year's team that was readily apparent in last year's team. And while, part of it is Buck, you can't put it all on Buck.
Hoff, let me pull you in here for a sec, Hoff. So I know that when we look at football, like, when a team's going through a rough spurt, you might look for that crazy linebacker to get everybody riled up, or the offensive lineman who is just a dirtbag, and that's a compliment. Kind of rally. Baseball, we look less toward the leadership. That's why the captaincy in baseball is less important. I'll put quotes around the word less. But who is the Mets leader? Who is the player, the galvanizing force that is trying to lift this team emotionally?
They make it like it's Escobar. They make it like it's Eduardo
Escobar.
Well, that's what they say. That's why they keep him around. They've talked about, and it's been known that Escobar is a great leader in that clubhouse. That's what has been said. His performance on the field doesn't really say that.
Now, I remember the stories last year. Took the whole team out to eat, which is cool, but you got to hit.
Hoff. Hey, he did hit a home run yesterday.
I know.
Hoff, you know what troubles me about what you just said?
I mean, there's a lot that troubles me, but go for it.
It should be Pete Alonso.
I think it should be Pete, and it should be Lindor.
But the fact, as a the resident Met fan in this quartet here, you didn't even think about Pete Alonso.
That's a good point. Escobar.
You immediately went to Escobar.
A guy who's, 33, who signed the 2-year deal, who's just, keep taking up space.
So let me ask you, Pete, why do you think other Met fans think that? Why did you not think of Pete Alonso?
Well, I've been told that Escobar is the leader, so that's why I think that way.
Well, who told you that, Mr. Met? I've been told.
That's just how it is. It's on the streets. Do I want it to be? Yes, I want it to be Pete Alonso. I want it to be Frisco.
Not Pete Alonso. That's a problem. The fact that Pete Alonso
you're right.
Not the guy. He is not the Aaron Judge. He is not the big stick in the clubhouse.
Hernandez. Keep it Mets. He's not that Hernandez.
Exactly.
Leader.
Is the fact that he's not that guy is a problem.
You're right,
because he's your best player.
So that's just another problem that we've identified. Okay, 877-337-6666. Tiki and Tierney here on The Fan. Yeah, I'm giving Buck 30 days. And just to salvage the season, if this thing's not fixed, you got to throw a Hail Mary. Excuse me. You got to throw a Hail Mary and try to get this thing going. Because the way the Mets are structured right now, it's not like, well, if it's not salvaged this year, we still have a 2, 3, 4-year runway with the core players. I don't think that you do. So you got to try to fix this, and it's radical, but I don't know what else you do unless you just cut 10 guys, DFA 10 guys, and literally let all the kids play, which I'm okay with, by the way, every single night. 877-337-6666.